Okay. So Mallory is really in charge, so she can take over.
Sure thing. Hi, everybody. My name's Mallory. I'm so excited to virtually meet you all. Today is a wonderful day. I want to start by saying happy birthday to Kim, celebrating
Thank you.
75 awesome years. And yeah, we're here for many reasons, I guess. As Kim has said, we are celebrating his 75th birthday, the 30th anniversary of the Banff classification, the 10th anniversary of the Technology and Future of Medicine course, Father's Day, summer solstice. It's just an auspicious day, this June 20th. So, yeah, and I think Kim is the common denominator here between everybody, obviously. So, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background briefly on how I know him, because I'm kind of helping him out organize an MC today. And I met Kim in 2013 at a music venue here in Edmonton, where we live. And at that point, he just boldly kind of came up to me after the show and asked if one day we might connect regarding some performance opportunities. And since then, it has been a wonderful coming on 8 years of friendship and mentorship and working together. Because as you may or may not know, Kim's a big supporter of the arts, as well as obviously his work in medicine. And yeah, it's just such a pleasure to be sharing in this celebration with you all today. So we have a bit of an itinerary. I feel like this is by far the most official and scheduled, packed full birthday party I've ever been to, which is awesome. But yeah, I know that I believe, David Wood, you're going to kick us off with how technology can help to improve mental health and human flourishing worldwide. So we would love to hear from you.
Well, I mean, it's still only 1 minute into the half an hour. And I mean, it's
Good.
are we ready? I mean, I was
Yes.
sort of
Yes.
waiting to another 10 minutes or so before I'd be
No,
back
no.
with
I
you.
think we can start. After all, the many thousands of people who can watch the video on YouTube can only be imagined. So,
Yes.
but it's a special experience to be here live now. So yeah. So
Okay.
I think you can proceed.
I think, Kim, you and I probably first met in 2010 at the pre-meeting ahead of the Harvard Humanity Plus event, which was held in 2010. I think that's when we first bumped into each other.
Yes, and it's been a gradually getting to know each other. We sort of sensed we had common interests, but but really, David's books, everything David does seems to fit so perfectly with what we're doing here that it's really remarkable. And Taryn, who you will hear from later, she holds a similar worldview to David's, as do I. So anyway, he's a good starting speaker for us, I think.
Yeah, but it's a worldview that holds multiple points of view as well. So we're not all going to sing exactly from the same hymn sheet. We're going to have some altos and baritones and quite a bit of variety, I hope.
Yeah.
So I've just put a slide up on the screen, or perhaps you can see it there.
Yes. Yeah.
And let me kick off with this topic that you asked me to speak about, which was about technology. And I confess I am a technologist. So I spent 25 years in the early days of mobile computing and smartphones. And I saw how technology was changing many areas of people's lives. And Kim has come up with a great topic to focus my mind, which is how technology can help to improve mental health and human flourishing worldwide. So it ties in with Kim's long interest in all aspects of improving medicine, not just from a technical point of view, but from a truly humanitarian point of view. So if we start by thinking about mental health, although we're smiling today, it is a great day, a day of celebration of many landmarks, including Kim's 75th. There are serious things going on in the world. And if we talk about what makes people die at different ages, if we talk about what makes 10 to 14-year-olds die, or a little bit older people, 15 to 24-year-olds, or 25 to 34-year-olds. In all these three age groups, the second biggest cause of death, can you guess? It is suicide. At least that's from figures in America from a couple of years ago, but I understand it is the same in many other countries too. What's the biggest cause of death in this analysis? It is unintentional injury. So that is even more worrying, that there are people dying from unintentional injuries, but far, far too many people are dying from suicides brought on by states of mental distress. And by the way, the rate of suicide doesn't stop when people are 34. People keep on killing themselves at roughly the same rate. It's just that when people get older, other causes of death become more dominant, like cancer and heart disease and diabetes and so forth. So if we reflect on consequences of poor mental health, certainly suicide is a very visible and ugly side. Doesn't always go that far. People harm themselves physically. People harm themselves mentally, harm themselves socially, as we, all of us from time to time, suffer from poor periods of mental health. We are more prone to irrationality, and even though we might be clever, we can apply our cleverness in service of destructive ends, destructive goals. As we are suffering from depression or anxiety or other mental problems, we are more prone to have our minds taken over by various mental pathogens such as conspiracy theories, and we can do a lot of harm to each other as a result. In fact, if we look at a whole spectrum of mental health, or we can look at this as a spectrum of human flourishing, at one end, poor mental health, on the other end, great human flourishing, good mental health. We've talked about people at this far end, people who might be so ill they take their own lives. Others in this state of poor mental health kill others. They have murderous tendencies. Worst case of all is when somebody feels so bleak, but also so angry, so depressed with the world that they wish to take out others with them when they kill themselves. But that's not the extent of the damage of poor mental health. There's another category in which people just harm themselves and harm others, and in which people are prone to be abusive, in which people's good qualities are serviced instead for bad purposes, and we are dysfunctional. And sadly, a lot of people in this category are in leading positions in society, some political leaders and others. And they may be capable, but because of various inner demons, inner pathologies, they're causing in some parts of the world lots of distress. But we can look more positively at people who get from time to time into states of flow, enjoy positive collaboration, enjoy engagement, and even further, we can look at people reaching peak mental states, ecstasies, mystical unions. And the question that I want to explore with Kim's suggestion is, how do we enable people to avoid these states on the left, and how can we enable or encourage people to attain these states on the right? And I'm going to look at a couple of answers to these questions. Now, occasionally, you'll get people saying, hey, we've just got to accept the way things are. We shouldn't rush in with our high-powered theories, our academic analysis, and try and fix things. We've just got to learn to accept the world the way it is. And if people are suicidal, that's the way it is. If others are fortunate enough to get into a state of flow, often, well, they must have done something good in a past life or some such rationalization. And I'm here to say I don't accept this at all as part of the Enlightenment, as part of seeking progress in this world. I think we can and should do better. And indeed, lots of traditional movements, lots of parts of society have had that positive attitude, whether it's bringing religion or in more recent times, psychology, whether it's bringing educational ideas, bringing literature. A lot of that has the same purpose. It's to enable people to avoid being dominated by bad states of mental health and enabling them to reach higher states more often. So we could talk about lots of practices: meditation, mindfulness, yoga, prayer, confessionals, all kinds of counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy. Music done right can enhance the mood, dance, hypnotism, immersion in nature, immersion in art, imbibing magical mushrooms or other mind-altering substances such as hallucinogens. So that's what history has done. But I'm here today to explore how technology might change this landscape of possibilities, not to replace these traditional and quite modern approaches in some cases, but to augment it in four ways. First, what we're having now in the 2020s, what we will have increasingly as the decade continues and as we look into the 2030s, we're having a more systematic understanding of what's actually happening inside people's brains and minds as they are in these various mental states. We're able to conduct more careful experiments to find out which of these practices I've listed below tend to work in which circumstances, rather than just occasionally spotting, hey, we danced and we felt better. What is it about the dance that led people to a better mental state? So more scientific experiments. More than that, technology can help us to measure via biomonitoring tools what's actually happening in real time in the brain. And even more than that, technology, Cognotech, or sometimes called Neurotech, can go beyond monitoring to actually alter the states of the brain by applying various interventions to the brain, electrical energy and others. And if this sounds otherworldly, if this sounds strange, there are quite a few good books that I would point to. The one on the left is written by Tan Le, Vietnamese American entrepreneur who is now resident in California. I'll say more about her work shortly. She is the co-founder of a company called EMOTIV. But her book is subtitled The New Era in Brain Enhancement. That is revolutionizing the way we think, work, and heal. Lots of up-to-date analysis of some possible technological interventions there. The book on the right is a slightly older one. It's by Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheel. It has a slightly different subtitle, How Silicon Valley, the Navy SEALs, and maverick scientists are revolutionizing the way we live and work. And I'm not entirely convinced by everything that's in this latter book, but there's a great deal of eye-opening analysis of what's happening in these different parts of the world. So there's lots going on. I want to step back a bit. I want to talk about my own view of history and my own view of the destiny of humanity. I like the analysis of this MIT professor of economics, Andrew McAfee. Got a few of his books I thoroughly recommend. He was quoted in an interview in the Financial Times a few years ago saying that history teaches us that nothing changes the world like technology. If we look at history, in many ways, things stayed the same in regarding many metrics of human flourishing in terms of health, in terms of life expectancy, in terms of education, in terms of access to energy. Most things stayed the same until the 18th century, when there was an industrial revolution based at first around the steam engine, and from then on, humanity's trajectory in many ways has bent sharply upwards. And as he says here, great wars and empires, despots and democrats, the insights of science and the revelations of religion, none of them transformed lives and civilizations as much as a few practical inventions. Here's my own very simple summary of all of history. It's far too simple, of course. History is much richer, but from a first approximation, this, I think, is what's going on. It is a history of increasing technological capability, which puts more opportunities in human hands and, to be clear, more risks into human hands. This technology is driven by societies that understand enough about the scientific method, understand enough about principles of openness, allowing people to come together in innovative new combinations, criticizing existing authorities, and forming new businesses, forming new collaborations, driving forwards positive feedback cycles in which one group of people's innovations and breakthroughs in turn become the foundation for other groups of people's innovations and breakthroughs. So we've seen 4 waves of industrial revolution, the first from around 1760 with steam, mechanization, and later trains, a second bigger one with synthetic chemicals, steel, mass production, and the replacement over several decades of steam engines by electrical engines. A third industrial revolution, which we are very much living through, in which computers were displacing more and more humans from different tasks, in which we have consumer electronics everywhere and we are connected with cellular communications. And for the last 10 years, we have been in the start of a 4th industrial revolution, which I will characterize in a moment as NBIC convergence. And the C is the Cognotech that I've been mentioning earlier. And there's an acceleration going on here as more and more people are part of the bigger process of education, entrepreneurs, innovation, and science. 120 years between the first 2 waves, their starts, 80 years between the starts of the second and third waves, 50 years between the starts of the third and fourth waves. This NBIC convergence, these 4 letters stand for I is infotech. It's not just computing, it's machine learning based on big data of ever larger groups of bits of information. N is nanotech. It's manipulating matter systematically at the atomic level, including, in due course, quantum computing, including nanobots, including, in due course, molecular scale assembly of factories. B is biotech. It's when we understand and manipulate all the components of biology, including reprogramming our genes. And C, as I mentioned already, is cognotech. It's when we understand and can reprogram our neurons as never before. And of the 4 components, this is the one that's least developed currently, but I believe in the next 20 years will come to be even more important than the other 3. The top of this chart roughly refers to hardware, the bottom to software, the left to physics, and the right to biology. But it's the 4 quadrants that interconnect with each other that really tell the story. Advances in one will accelerate advances in others. As we have better nanotech, we have better sensors. These sensors allow us to scan what's going on in the brain more fully. As we understand what's happening inside human reasoning, human intelligence, we can copy some of these aspects into artificial intelligence selectively. And as we have better artificial intelligence, it allows us to have better healthcare, better medicine, and yes, better mental health too. So let's look at some examples of how this is happening, and then I'll hand back. So I'm going to run through 4 or 5 quick looks at different groups. What I'm showing you here is from the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute. Some of you may know this was founded by one of the earliest employees at Google. Instead of search, he talked about search inside yourself. Chade-Meng Tan, he wrote this book with contributors from Daniel Goleman, one of the academic leaders in the field of emotional intelligence, and John Kabat-Zinn, one of the leading analysts of mindfulness meditation. And the idea of this is to look again at traditional practices of mindfulness, but to express it in a way that makes sense for people living in the 2010s and 2020s, teaching it as an engineering discipline. And to some extent, some of the claims made for this are a little bit exaggerated, overhyped, but I do believe that as time moves on, this movement is having a bigger and bigger impact, bringing some of the insights from traditional mindfulness up to date and improving them with application of science and engineering. That's a sort of West Oriental tradition. Recently in the West, we've had a lot of progress with various aspects of psychology, including cognitive behavioral therapy. Well, now we're seeing more and more companies combining these traditional or these existing psychological counseling techniques with applications. So just one example here, the company Resilience, which helps people use mobile phone applications to challenge their negative thoughts, to track their moods, emotions, activities, and so on. Another traditional way of enhancing mental states, a dangerous way, but one that can work, is various psychedelics. Well, in the last 20 or 30 years, there's been more and more systematic study of what psychedelics actually do to the brain and in which circumstances are their impacts positive. This is a slide from a group at Imperial College London. It's described in this book here by the well-known food writer, Michael Pollan, who's written many marvelous books about food and eating. And his most recent book from a few years ago is his own exploration into modern research into the new science of psychedelics. So here's a slide from this Beckley Imperial Psychedelic Research. I'm not going to go into any details. It just shows genuine differences between people taking something like LSD and some people taking a placebo. The LSD was found to increase connectivity between areas of the brain that do not normally communicate, while suppressing the activity of the DMN, the brain's ego center. Couple of other examples, combining some of the other methods with virtual reality. There is a lot of exciting progress that people are looking forward to here. 3 ways virtual reality could transform mental health treatment from this recent article in The Conversation. And if you're wondering what this picture is on the bottom right, what this character is, he is a virtual coach inside of virtual reality who can guide people in various ways through different mental health practices. This is the headset from the company EMOTIV, founded by Tan Le, the writer I mentioned earlier. This is a way to scan non-invasively what's happening inside the brain. It does EEG and analyzes the data to work out in which circumstances we become more stressed, in which circumstances we are more focused, and lots of other things. And it is accompanied by a whole set of software tools and software development kits. Here's just one picture there. This is just reading parts of what's happening in the brain. The next example is to stimulate the brain with TDCS, that's transcranial direct current stimulation. And this does sound scary, and I'm not recommending anybody tries this at home, but with careful calibrated headsets, it is possible. It is believed to have significant improvements on people's mental state. So here's a chart from Flow Neuroscience talking about how using this headset for 30 minutes 5 times a week can reduce acute symptoms, stop negative thought spirals, and it can be used in combination again with an application. I should mention Neuralink. Neuralink is the company by Elon Musk. Here is an artist's impression of what their kit might look like in a few years' time. It's something you might wear outside of your head and communicates wirelessly with something that's been implanted inside your head. And why on earth would anybody want this? Well, if you are handicapped, if you are paraplegic, or if you are limited in some other ways, this is definitely of interest because the system can read part of what you're thinking and can also in some ways stimulate and control parts of your brain. Early days, but there is lots of potential. And the last example before I pause for breath is from a French-Canadian researcher, Jean Hebert, who is at Albert Einstein School of Medicine, and he is looking at possibly more natural ways to enhance the brain, not by implanting electronics, but by allowing more brain cells to be grown. And his views are covered in a fascinating book, Replacing Aging, in which he argues that we will become more healthy, not just by trying to repair the damage that has been accumulated throughout our body, but by introducing repaired parts of the body. So in due course, repaired organs. We can't replace the brain as a whole, but we can introduce new brain cells. So that's coming too. So my summary. I think there are lots of possibilities that should be explored, possibilities brought into reality by the fourth industrial revolution, NBIC. There are big potential upsides given how much damage that bad mental health causes to individuals, to families, to societies, possibly the whole world. There are big upsides in helping people to experience flow and peak experiences more often. As for making this available worldwide, there are lots of indications that with scale and with innovation, the costs of these things are coming down too. So they might become as pervasive and as well loved as low-cost smartphones in due course. I've skimmed over the whole big subject of potential downsides, and perhaps we'll discuss that. Sometimes people become too focused on technical solutions when more solutions from different areas would be appropriate, including changes in society, changes in economics, changes in politics, changes in philosophy. So sometimes we can be misled by technical solutions, and sometimes a technical solution actually makes matters worse by causing side effects, adverse reactions. But neither of these facts is a reason to stop looking at this whole field. After all, many medicines do have adverse reactions when they're first introduced, and it's up to medical practitioners to figure out how to get the benefits without having the drawbacks. My final remark is that this whole field is changing remarkably fast, and it deserves much more attention, which is exactly what Kim in his Future of Medicine project has been doing for many years. And I think it's going to become even more exciting in the months and years and decades ahead. And I look forward to that very much.
Great. That was a fantastic presentation. So any questions? Maybe I should point out that Julinar and I are in charge of our department's morale, lifting people's spirits. And if she doesn't do it, I should do it, and so on. Between the two of us, we're supposed to keep that happening. That may not be something you knew about us before. So, Julinar, do you have any questions for David?
Wonderful presentation. I learned so much. There's terms that I haven't even heard of. So thank you so much. I'm so glad I joined this so early in the morning and with my coffee so I can follow the thread. I just wanted to expand more on the adverse reactions. What adverse reactions should we worry about? I mean, you mentioned LSD. Should that be legalized to the point that it should be, used more widely, so.
Well, let's start with coffee. And you're drinking coffee. Many countries made coffee illegal at various times because they were afraid that would have adverse reactions, bad impacts on people's health, bad impacts on society. Some societies outlawed alcohol, others outlawed for a while coffee. And it's absolutely true that these mind-altering drugs can have terrible consequences. It's like driving a car. If we drive a car in a bad way, we can kill people, we can kill ourselves. And so I am absolutely not advocating anything goes on this, but I am advocating that we take the time to understand, as is being done in this group at Imperial College and elsewhere in the world, belatedly, to understand what are the circumstances in which these treatments can enhance people who are suffering in many bad ways from mental health problems, but also can enhance those of us who are maybe more in the middle of the spectrum and would like to have these flow experiences more readily. So there are drawbacks there. There are drawbacks to stimulating the brain with too much music. Music can mislead us, can put us in the wrong mood as well as in the right mood. Music can make us deaf if we're not careful. So all kinds of things can go wrong. And in terms of interfering with the brain, well, we have to be extremely careful. The brain is arguably the most precious, but we shouldn't just have all hands off and say, well, we're not getting involved. I remember the first time there was a heart transplant. Most people were shocked and horrified. What a disgusting idea to have somebody else's heart inside your body. But many tens of thousands of people are alive now because we figured out how to do heart transplants. And although it's still not nice, and it's still very expensive, sadly, it is a way that people can benefit from. So I think in due course, we will be tinkering with our brains more.
So are there other questions? All right. So I wanted to give Taryn a bit of an intro. David has a really remarkable background, and I could have gone on for a very long time with a long intro for him. But probably none of you know anything about, or very little about Taryn, and there are some quite remarkable things. So in 2013, I got the idea that what the area of human flourishing needed was more involvement by young people. There seemed to be very little involvement by young people. Most people pontificating about transhumanism and things like that were 40 plus, and I couldn't think of many voices of young people. And because I was leading this course with very smart students, I thought immediately one of them would come in and take up the mantle and run with it, But it actually took 7 years. During that 7 years, I kept making this pitch that what the field really needs is young people to come in and fix things. And Taryn was the first person to really take that seriously and do it. And the other thing that is remarkable is, I run a course, and the students in the course often show me drafts of their final paper before it's complete. And it's quite usual for me to make suggestions for improvements in the draft. And then, because I hold absolute power, right? They do what I say. I say add references and so on, and then that's what they do. So Taryn was the first student ever who rejected every suggestion that I made. For instance, I wanted her to put in a lot of references, like give us the background of humanity plus and transhumanism. Give us Max Moore and the previous, manifestos and so on, going back to the 1970s, 1980s. Give us all that. And she rejected all those suggestions, everything that I suggested, and instead provided a paper that showed more of her own creativity than any student had ever done in the 10-year history of the course. So she's quite a confident young person, and I think there's good reason for that confidence. So Taryn, would you like to present your presentation?
Just give me a sec.
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay, you can see that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Feel free to interrupt me at any point. I'm happy to kind of pause and take questions or explain something a little bit more clearly. So I'm actually addressing a pretty similar topic as David. I'm trying to look at it from a more global perspective, from a multicultural perspective, if you will, and with a special emphasis on what we can do in the non-Western world. So for context, these are the developing countries that I've been to so far. I can't really speak to the experience in other countries, aside from just reading books or movies. But I think that being in these countries has really given me a different perspective and has really impacted my perspective on this issue. And so, like David said, it's really not cut and dry, the spectrum of well-being, if you will. On the one hand, we have human flourishing, living your best life, the optimal range of human emotion, optimal health. But on the other side, we have pathology, of course, depression, anxiety, physical pathology. But there's a lot of us in the middle, we're not quite pathological, we're not quite flourishing, we're kind of in that languishing, mediocre state. And I think that this is experienced worldwide. There's been various studies interviewing citizens from all sorts of different countries. And it seems that the majority of people, as would be expected, are kind of lumped in that middle zone. And so, like David was saying, there is a need to, or an incentive to move towards that side of flourishing. Even if you're not pathologically suffering, there is room for improvement for a lot of us. And so this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this is kind of how I've been conceptualizing, international development priorities. The theory goes that the needs at the bottom take priority, and as they're fulfilled, you move up to begin pursuing other things. Once you feel safe, then you can kind of focus on your love and belonging. And eventually, once you get to the very tippy top, you are focusing on self-actualization. And the way that Maslow describes this, and people using his work have described this, it sounds very much so how we define human flourishing. Reaching your full potential, you're thinking creatively, you're problem solving, and being concerned with morality. But I'd like to complicate this today. I think that thinking in this way, this linear way, is really problematic and, inhibits the amount of support that we can offer, each other in our community, but also the global community. And so what I'd like to, if there's one thing I want you to take away, it's that we have a lot of assumptions that are based in these Western ideas. A lot of psychological studies are weird, if you will. When someone in the psychology department wants to study somebody, they'll usually try to get people from the local community, and it usually ends up being undergraduate students. But really, these folks, while their opinion is valuable and definitely is necessary, these folks don't really represent a large majority of the global population. The truth is that we're lacking a lot of knowledge about the human experience from these other perspectives. Of course, it's difficult it's understandable that this is the case. It's harder to interview someone halfway across the world than it is in your own backyard. But, our paradigms are really skewed or potentially skewed. And so I'd like to suggest that in a lot of ways, the good life, if you will, is subjective. I think that there are, you know, as David was saying, like there are very objective, real things that do help improve the human condition, you know, help people be healthier, help people live better lives. But in a lot of ways, it's more complicated than that. You know, when we're thinking about this self-actualization and even, you know, this esteem category, which might have to do with achievements and, you know, self-esteem, respect, these are very individualistic aims. You know, they're very focused on the self, very, you know, personal, individual. Whereas if we look at this love and belonging, perhaps it's more of a collectivistic goal. You know, maybe these values would be more important in different contexts, especially, you know, collectivistic cultures abroad, even indigenous cultures here. And so it's not quite, you know, this moving towards perfecting the self might not actually be the aim for many people. You know, maybe forming those connections is much more enriching and valuable. And I'd like to also point out that, you know, safety and fulfilling like physiological needs is also not quite as simple as we'd like it to be. You know, of course, there are certain caloric needs that we all have and certain, you know, safety require, like we can't be out in the sun for a million hours straight. But these things also carry a lot of cultural significance. You know, these like eating pork or not eating pork can have an impact on someone's, you know, mental well-being if, you know, abstaining from those things is of value to them. And so what I'd like to suggest today is that our values and even our experiences affect the relative importance of each of these levels in our community and also in our own lives. And so when we think about how we can support the flourishing of others, you know, whether that's through social supports, technological innovation, etc., you know, the lived experience of the individual ought to be taken seriously. And we ought to really make sure that individuals are empowered to make decisions for their own lives. You know, they're not being manipulated or exploited in some way. And we'll go into what I mean by that. So to address these weird assumptions, you know, we can really broaden our framework for what it means to flourish. You know, we need to do the research to better understand what the solution should be. And so I feel that a lot of the studies that I was coming across were ethnographical, if you will. You know, we're kind of observing, like even some of the Western studies are, you know, observing what people are doing. We're looking at, you know, their behavior. We're looking at what they outwardly express, and we're interpreting that for ourselves. You know, we're concluding what their logic might be. We're thinking about these things in a very external, surface level way. But what I think we need more of are phenomenological studies. And this type of study describes what it's like to really be embodied, to experience the world through a human consciousness. You know, in the women's studies field, we call it lived experience. You know, what is this person's, like, what do these values mean to this person? What does it feel like to be connected to this community? What is the logic behind their decisions? And I think understanding these things can really give us a much richer view of what people need and what people want. And then back to I don't like the word exploitation. I want to say empower. Like I wish that we could, you know, empower people and give them access to the decisions or the options or opportunities that are best for them. But that's not always possible, you know, due to finances and everything. But at least we can avoid exploiting them. And by that I mean, you know, like, I think everybody who knows me knows I have issues with like beef with social media, but like Facebook has been gamified. It's developed to become addictive. It's developed to sell products to people. You know, it's developed for advertising. And so even if we think that this is a great tool for, you know, helping people connect, maybe even helping people, you know, get physiological needs met, you know, you can buy your couch through Facebook Marketplace. I want to ask, you know, do the ends justify the means? You know, are there better ways that we can do this? How do we make sure that when we're trying to promote community, promote health, how are we making sure that this is actually in the person's best interest and we're not taking advantage of them? And so, of course, I'm promoting a more holistic approach to this issue. You know, not just this hierarchical, you're working towards, you know, self-actualization is great, esteem is great, but they can all happen simultaneously in these complicated ways. I understand, like, I don't think he necessarily in all applications means that you have to only go step by step, but I think it's a lot more chaotic than we'd like it to be. Because I had this kind of naive notion that, you know, we only need to focus on meeting the physiological needs of the developing world. You know, once we only focus on that, then we can move up to safety, and then we can keep going up the hierarchy and provide aid, support, whatever, in that way. But I don't think that's the case. I really like this quote. The author was a Nobel Prize winner in economics. And when they're speaking about economic growth, they say that we're largely incapable of predicting where it's going to happen. We don't know. We can't always predict which developing country is going to have that spark of productivity. And they say that, you know, given what it requires, we generally can say, you know, if people are well educated, people are well fed, healthy, and they feel, you know, secure enough to invest in their children, this is probably, you know, going to help. But that's not always possible, you know. Until that happens, we need to actually make that weight bearable. And so I think hope, even though it's not included on Maslow's hierarchy, I think that it is a really key factor here, you know, encouraging people to keep pursuing the top of the pyramid if you want to use that model, or just continue expanding out, you know, these different sections, helping them actually believe that these things are possible. And so this is kind of my little model, if you will. I think that these holistic approaches are really necessary. I think that they need to be contextualized for the person, contextualized for the community, and that they need to be for the empowerment, or at least not the exploitation of these individuals. And I think that hope is really that binding factor that will help people continue progressing in all these different domains. And so I think we have a really exciting opportunity here. I don't want to minimize the absolute tragedy that the pandemic has been, you know, worldwide, especially in developing countries. It has hit really hard. But I think I want to see it as a square one. You know, we're back to the drawing board a little bit in, you know, making it through all of this. We're forming new global connections. We're sharing resources, strategies, and we're connected more than ever, you know, as evidenced by today's group. And I think that for a lot of folks, the pandemic has kind of caused a bit of an existential crisis, you know? We're re-examining what it means to be happy, what we want in life. You know, do we really have to work 9 to 5 in the office? You know, do we really want to struggle financially? Like, what do these things, not that you can choose to struggle financially, but, you know, what do we want as a society? How can we relate to each other? And I think all of this isolation has really affirmed the importance of mental health and community. I think that, or I hope that as we move forward, there's going to be an eagerness to connect in our local, global communities, and also an increased willingness to actually discuss mental health issues. You know, I think we've realized how significant mental health actually is in our daily lives. And I also want to emphasize that this is a two-way street. You know, the learning has to go both ways or all ways. You know, there's this kind of Western arrogance, I don't know, but feeling that, you know, we as Westerners have everything to teach others, but nothing to learn from them. And I think that's absolutely not the case. You know, to truly form these connections and, you know, make improvements, like clearly there are people suffering here as well. And there's like, it's a sign that something's not working. You know, I think that a lot of the loneliness and depression that is experienced here stems from this, you know, individualistic and work-focused attitude. And so I think that looking at communities that value culture and value connection can really teach us a lot. And in fact, one of the leading therapy approaches is actually influenced by Eastern religion, Buddhist, or I guess philosophy, but Buddhist philosophy, Taoist philosophy, this whole dialectical theory of understanding the world has really helped a lot of people overcome their anxiety and their depression. You know, it focuses a lot on, you know, mindfulness and non-judgmentalness, and these are qualities that are really lacking in a lot of the Western world, but that we can glean from these other perspectives. And this is just one example. I think there are so many things to learn from each other and, you know, incorporate into our toolkit of solutions. That's really all I have to say. Happy birthday, Kim. I really appreciate your willingness to, you know, talk, like have these difficult conversations or ask these difficult questions, I guess is a better way to say it. But yeah, I think this kind of innovation is really necessary and important. And I'm happy to take questions or comments now.
Yeah, well, I wanted to welcome Arjun Karki here. He was the founding vice chancellor for the new medical school that we created in Kathmandu, Patton Academy. He's now starting a new university there, and called simply the University of Nepal. And one thing about me and that country, where you may have the wrong impression, so you may have heard that, like, I've been going to Nepal, helping them for 23 years, and you might think, well, gee, Kim, you must have done a lot of teaching of technology and the future of medicine there. And you'd be astounded to know I've never taught on that subject there because it didn't fit the context. If you were talking to medical students or teachers in a medical school where they hadn't had any futuristic teaching before, started telling them all about this futuristic stuff, it would have been of zero value. But now with the new university that Arjun is planning, it probably will make sense for me to at some point teach about technology in the future of medicine in Nepal for the very first time. So Arjun, welcome. And I wonder if you have any comments. I know you only heard the last half of Taryn's talk, but it's probably pretty clear what she was talking about.
So, well, Kim, it's a great honor and a privilege for me to join you here. I'm sorry I was late. First of all, and happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
It's a very great celebration amongst friends and colleagues. As you said, I did not manage to catch on time, so I just saw a few slides, last few slides, I would say. But I could give, as you guessed, I could get a sense of the spirit of the approach, of the very empathetic thinking about the issues surrounding humanity, you know, you, me, us, and what is very enlightening is the basic necessity, you know, the hierarchical thing that she displayed, from the basic needs to self-actualization, you know, something that we used to be taught about, this Maslow's theory when we were students. But from my standpoint, I mean, these are very important. If the fact that if we say we are human race is belongs to all of us, we belong to the same human race, and we share the humanity, the culture, the aspiration, the difficulties, and each culture has learned to deal with it and to survive and to thrive, to flourish, and to continue to make the societies better in whatever context they begin with. So when Taryn, in that one of her slides, the issue of manpower and the brain power, she mentioned, is so important in countries like ours, where the history of education is very, very short, and the quality part is equally concerning. Especially, I'm talking about my own country, Nepal, which, as many of you know, is sandwiched between two giant neighbors, India on the south and the China on the north. And given their geographic size, the population size, the kind of development they have achieved, and the military power, we as a small nation need to be, you know, more smart in a sense, more far-sighted, more competent, more, you know, confident, I would say, to deal with these neighbors and the both at the regional and a global level, not only to have your independent existence, but also to negotiate and benefit from the prosperity that they have. But our universities are not producing, unfortunately, the kind of citizens, the kind of thinkers, the intellectuals that are required to deal with this situation that we are in. And therefore, given that, we thought we have very few options, either to resign to the whole situation and do nothing, or leave this country and go abroad, come to Canada, where people have little better organized society, or take it as a challenge like our previous generation did when they were encountered with so many problems. Imagine when there were no electricity, no internet, no telephone. The people in that area, in that era, must have suffered much more than we did, but they devoted their time to create new technology, and now that has, in a sense, made our life more convenient. So therefore, we owe so much to our previous generation. We benefited so much. And I am of the believer that we too have some obligation, some responsibility to help the younger generation and the generation to come. So that is the reason why we have embarked upon this initiative of creating a new university in Nepal. And Kim has been so kind and encouraging all this. And we hope our university will be very much in line with what Taryn tried to articulate. We share that values, and we look forward to collaborate on these themes and share our mutual experiences and develop this really a global friendship and collaborative partnership in the time ahead. I very much look forward to that, and I would like to take this opportunity not only to wish again a very, very happy birthday to my dear friend Kim, but also thank him for providing this platform to listen to this ongoing dialogue. So thank you so much.
Great, thank you for that. Are there other questions on Taryn's talk? David?
I thought it was a really fascinating talk, and to build on some of the points that Arjun was just making, I wanted to ask Taryn about hope. And Taryn, you mentioned different things that could be done to help mental health improve. And right on the edge of your chart, there was hope. And I agree. Without hope, it's much harder for people to make the endeavors for improvements. But where do you see hope coming from?
I think, yeah, I kind of avoided addressing that directly because it is such a complicated matter, right? I think that we can inspire hope, or hope to inspire hope by educating people, helping them see the potential that there is, helping people understand what can come for them, but at the same time, starting to have people in power that actually resonate with the people's needs. I don't know how we necessarily go about doing that. We can't interfere with their politics necessarily, but I think that in the international community, having strong leaders with empathetic visions, with, clear visions that the everyday person can understand, would play a big role in helping people be hopeful that there is positive change coming, that positive change can actually make it to their life. And even just, encouraging people in our own communities. It can take, like, when we are flourishing, we can show other people what it's like to flourish. We can help inspire that change in them too.
So if people can see a credible scenario of a positive future, rather than just more of quite a miserable situation. When Arjun mentioned about the visions for the future of Nepal. Is Nepal to be thought of in the future as being dominated by two large countries on its borders? Is that the end of the definition of Nepal? No, surely there must be more. And if people can see this bigger vision, not that Nepal is going to dominate the others in terms of size or population, that's not possible, but there has to be some realistic vision in which there is enough goodness and abundance, a flourishing that can give people the reason to rise above their pettiness.
Can I make a small comment here? I mean, David's question is very, very valid, and a small group of us who are embarking on this project, which is not easy, especially in countries like ours. The issue of, how come that you guys are taking this initiative? And that relates to the question that you raised with regards to the hope. And my own reflection on this is that, there are maybe three things that I would say. Number one is the history itself. Remember that our ancestors used to live in the caves. They didn't know how to have a fire. They didn't know how to cultivate land or raise grains, and mainly used to live by hunting. From that point onward, the human history has been going in a, for the lack of better word, in a progressive direction. So if that is the case, if people in the previous generation did not lose hope, there is no reason why we should lose, and we should uphold this spirit of hope. That is one thing. Secondly, the evolution of technology has enabled us to share our thoughts, our values, our spirit much more efficiently than it was possible, maybe let's say 10 years ago. The way we are communicating now, the way we are being connected, I think that is a very powerful tool to uphold this, spirit of hope, I would say. And because of this technology, the people with like-minded have been brought together. That might include leaders, that might include intellectuals, that might include activists, that might include, academics. So it has made the possibility of having a synergy and solidarity. For me, that is what gives me the hope that we will succeed. Our humanity has a bright future. Thank you. But it's coming from Nepal, so you have to contextualize what I mean by this.
Thank you very much.
Could I ask Kim the same question? Kim, what gives you the hope to keep doing so much at your slightly elderly age, when many others would be retiring to the golf course or the Netflix, but you are throwing yourself into so many new activities? What is the wellspring of your hope for a vision and energy?
Yeah, probably you think I'm going to have a very complicated answer to that. But really, in my case, recently, it comes down to something very simple. We're doing a book, memoir, assisted by two of the people on this call, Mallory Chipman and Ching Yun Wang. And Ching suggested that there was something neuroatypical about me, but in a positive way. And we should get to the bottom of it and figure out what it is. So we did this neo personality inventory revised version. And it showed something that I never could have predicted, that my openness to experience is like off the charts. you know? And my neuroticism, my worrying about things that don't need to be worried about, is extremely low. And those are two things about myself that I never would have predicted. And so probably that accounts for a lot of other things. Why do I keep on striving, you know? So there's a very interesting footnote. You know, I was going to hide the results of my personality test from everyone because I was sure it was going to be embarrassing and show how strange and weird I am. And I was really very surprised that I turned out to be like the poster boy for a personality test. But there's one proviso there that's kind of scary that basically says this won't change. You know, these scores are immutable. They're not going to change. Yeah, so I think even if I wanted to, I couldn't become a closed person with low openness. Yeah. So if you're surprised by that, imagine how surprised I was. I was really surprised. So now a substantial number of the students are getting personality testing just like I did. And they're all saying they're going to share the results. You don't have to share the results. But anyway, we'll see what happens. But looks like we'll end up with a total of maybe 7, 8, 9, or 10 people who have taken this test. So you see, there are simpler explanations for things. What makes Kim tick? You probably thought there's no answer to that, right? I know there's quite a precise answer. Yeah.
So people are diverse, and that's a
Yes.
good lesson. That's what Taryn was emphasizing in the beginning. Don't look for a single formula that's going to apply to every person on the planet and say that's how to enhance their mental health. Different people will respond in quite different ways.
Yeah. You can think of how terrible it would be if we were a genetically inbred species, like a lot of the rats and mice that we use in the lab. They're very homogeneous, and that makes scientific studies much easier. But humans are exactly the opposite of that. And yeah, so
perhaps I could throw this question back to Taryn. And Taryn, you were saying we need to become more comfortable about talking about mental health. You know, when people hide away worries about mental health, it's actually not healthy at all. Is the kind of discussion we're having now part of the trend that you would like to see happening?
Oh, certainly. I think talking about it in, this kind of an academic setting, if you will, having these philosophical discussions about it is very important, just to acknowledge that we're all people, to bring in that humanity into our professional lives, our academic lives, but even like in our interpersonal relationships, we're colleagues here, we're friends. I think being more transparent about our needs and our struggles can really help us, because we all struggle, nobody, especially in this context where we're always trying to be the best, always trying to improve ourselves, it becomes difficult to admit when you're not doing great. It's difficult to admit when you're, not flourishing, because we have this idea that we should be perfect. So I think opening up that conversation and admitting that, we're all just people, we're having this shared experience, can really help us actually address that issue. I think it's
Know thyself, the beginning of wisdom, and knowing each other is the beginning of a better relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So I've just put in the chat the Doctors for Nepal Relief Fund, and I know the people behind this because they were part of the meetings we had regarding patent. And so, and it's not just you, the people on this call, but also people who end up watching this on YouTube, you know, the larger group of people who could also potentially make a contribution. Here's a bit more details. And Kate Yarrow, who is the person behind this, was a part of our consultation meetings. Yeah, it's very interesting. Zoom has a limit on how much text you can paste. I didn't know that before, but yeah, let's try this. All right. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So I very much regret the very deep and negative impact that COVID has had on Nepal. It's been serious in Canada and the US too, but it has been more serious in Nepal. So anyway, and one of the reasons I'm so grateful to Arjun and Pooja for being here is I know their lives are very complicated right now by the COVID pandemic. So
I was wondering if I could ask a question before we
sure.
get too
Yeah.
far, based on some of the presentations. And I am coming at this from a perspective that's probably very different in the sense that I've not formally, or academically thought of this much before, but personally have. And some things that both David and Taryn brought up that I, have a lot of questions about is, I think comes most of all down to access. And I wonder in many capacities how that is going to be something that we can actually move beyond to a point where we can even get to languishing in certain scenarios, let alone to flourishing. Because when I think about things I guess two main things come to mind. One, we're talking about innovations in medicine or technology that are affording some people great opportunity to improve their mental health, or even a greater opportunity to communicate with people across the globe or build relationships with people in other nations, etc. And, obviously that's something that because of, Taryn spoke to how even social media has been gamified and commodified in some way, as have so many different technologies, which can potentially, create space for competition within industry and new innovations. And I see that it's not all bad, but I also struggle with the fact that it means that these things are commodified and therefore some of them are completely inaccessible. And, David mentioned heart transplants being expensive. And, my politics are showing, but I'm like, why should anyone have to pay for that, period? So I guess that's one question I have, and potentially could also be connected to through social media as maybe the most accessible way in theory to build a more holistic global connection with people and broaden our communities that way. How do we educate the public to use and engage with social media through a critical lens? Because while it may afford these opportunities to build greater connections, give us access to these more holistic approaches, and therefore move towards languishing or flourishing, it can also be one of the greatest detriments to some people's mental health. It can cause further isolation. And I think that that's obviously something that's pretty scary. I also think it can divide people. I was listening recently to a podcast called Mind the Gap about the gap between the Democrats and Republican voters in the United States, and how so much misinformation and just sensationalized things that are shared on social media have caused people to believe that certain things are factual. For example, one example they gave was that Democrats believe like 70% of Republicans are anti-gun control, whereas the actual fact that, you know, based on statistics and surveys is something more like 30%. And one suggestion that these journalists made on the podcast was, well, what if, you know, how there are fact checking things on social media now, what if rather than just saying this may be false information, because a lot of people aren't going to go and actually investigate that for themselves, if instead social media could build in the ability to say, actually, this is the fact behind this versus, you know, a heavily swayed opinion or just straight up, you know, lie. Because yeah, I think social media is accessible, it's free to use, but at the same time, there's so much room to have those divides spread further and end up working away from that globalized, holistic, you know, journey towards nourishing because of these divides that are being perpetuated online. That's a long ramble, but I'm curious as to any thoughts on that.
Taryn, do you want to answer first?
Sure. I think that, yeah, I share a lot of your views when it comes to social media. I'm very cautious about promoting it as this great solution because there are so many, at the end of the day, it's still a business, right? And I think that's where a lot of the sticky stuff comes in. How do we get, you know, makers of these technologies, these platforms, whatever, to actually want to make these changes if it doesn't serve them financially? I think that there's a lot to be said about how these algorithms work. I think, you know, social media is built to retain people, to help them find things that they're interested in, but that often channels people into very certain groups. You know, it really divides us systematically. Like it's very strategic, and it works to help you find, you know, if you like cats, you're going to find more cat accounts, and that's great. But when you like, you know, things that maybe aren't great for you, or maybe are radicalizing you in some way, that also pushes you in a certain direction. And so I think having these kind of conversations with these platform makers is important. You know, how can we intervene in this algorithm? How can we have a bigger dose of humanity in these systems? And then to kind of address your first question better, I think access is definitely like a huge issue. I don't know how, like even just regular therapy, right? If you want to access therapy, it's like $200 per hour and you have to wait 6 months. And that's not always feasible for people. You know, we tout these therapies as the best solution because they are, but you know, it's impossible for a lot of people to get access to. And so I think that, you know, these apps and what have you are a really good tool for that. I think that they can help not fully fill the gap, but at least provide some sort of support. I think that also encouraging people who do have access to these therapies and, you know, do have access to, you know, the time to invest in themselves, to encourage them to be there for their family members and their friends, and really, you know, encourage people to see therapy as this ongoing process. Like as you heal yourself, you can help people heal themselves as well, hopefully.
I mean, this is such a rich topic, and we could spend a long time, and we probably should. Not maybe today, but other times we should explore this. mean, there are encouraging apps that do have these counseling built into them. You can start talking to the app, and the app will ask you quite good questions and will encourage you to open up. And in some cases, it's been very useful and productive. It's probably not as good as paying $200 an hour and getting the best of a human counselor, but my goodness, it's much more accessible, and it's available 24/7. So there are some useful, encouraging steps forwards there, provided people find the right apps, and instead of being misled by those which are selling solutions which aren't actually real solutions. Of course, that's also the case with humans too. Sometimes humans set themselves up as counselors, and people go for years and years and years and feel, well, they may be making some progress, but they're not. So there's questions of trust in the real world too. Beyond apps, I think virtual reality is coming. We will have more and more of us have headsets we can move into, which will help us to have a more immersive experiences, which can help us get some of these experiences more quickly. And to start off with, they'll be expensive again, but over time, I think, as has happened with smartphones, their costs will come down. I'm not against the involvement in businesses in the provision of these solutions, but it's certainly the case that some businesses can distort the incentives. That's why we need democratic oversight. That's why we need regulators who understand what's going on, rather than being led by the nose by very savvy PR people inside their businesses. And we should look at other examples. We should look at Wikipedia. That's not particularly making money, but it's a great asset for the world. And there are other examples like that too. And thankfully, there are now some fact checking. There's some dynamic fact checking comes along. It's not very good. Sometimes you look at a Facebook post and it's automatically being flagged up, and it's something you think, well, this wasn't quite right. You shouldn't have said this in this case, but at least it's coming in that direction. And as AI improves, and I believe AI is going to improve a lot in the next few years, then hopefully these messages will be targeted much more quickly. At the same time, devious politicians will become cleverer at working around it. They'll figure out that if they say a certain word, they'll get flagged, so they'll try and say another word so they won't get flagged. It's like the QAnon people. Their buzzwords were flagged up, so they adopted the buzzword save the children, because they claim that what they're all about is saving the children from a presumed pedophile conspiracy. So they couldn't be flagged for using the word save the children, because that is used in many other purposes as well. So people will work around it. So it's not going to be an overnight success, but over time, AI will, I think, get better. In terms of the cost of things like heart transplants, even in countries where they're free on the point of use, as in the UK, people can get a heart transplant. Somebody's got to pay for it. It's still an expensive thing, sadly, which is why we need to look at cheaper ways to help people not need a new heart. And of course, helping people to eat more healthily to start off with, and exercise more healthily, and to get their health monitored earlier will stop people needing the very expensive solutions. And so again, that's where constant monitoring might help. And that will remove the need for the more expensive treatments, and therefore it will mean everybody's health and everybody's mental health will benefit. So there's a long rant in return to your, not a rant, a long statement in response to your fascinating provocation, Mallory.
So are there other questions?
A comment, Kim, it's Eleanor.
Yeah.
Just wanted to thank Taryn, because that Maslow's hierarchy has kind of bugged me all these years. And I totally agree that the more interconnected this model, the jigsaw puzzle, how it's linked together, I think resonates more with me, because sometimes I wonder, if you don't have self-actualization, how can you be, or the esteem or the love of yourself, be interconnected enough to be part of a community that could outreach and have that, and have hope together, if you will. And it also kind of, I like David's question about where hope comes from, because I thought, well, hope comes from others, but clearly Kim's example shows hope comes from yourself too. So it's nice to see that there's all these directions of hope. And thank you once again, Kim, for having this forum to have these types of discussions and exchange of ideas.
I wanted to mention something now that most of you will think when I say it, surely that is not true. And that is that many artificial intelligence leaders have recently, in the past 5 years, become vegetarian or vegan because they believe when machines are smarter than we are, they're going to look very dimly at people who kill animals to eat them. And you might say, well, but that's crazy. But it even includes me. So I became sort of a modified vegetarian 3 years ago, having watched a lot of videos from other more prominent AI people about the reason that they had got vegetarian or vegan. Okay, so let's examine my eating habits. I still eat salmon, and my children, my 3 sons, tease me by saying, what if AI has a special affinity for salmon and finds out how much salmon you eat? So you think you've modified your diet so AI will love you, but actually AI thinks you're worse than anybody else because you have such a salmon-oriented diet. So I'm just saying life is complicated, you know. I don't know what the right choices are. But yeah, I'm helping the salmon industry financially every day. That's true. So other questions?
Well, Kim, I have to ask, why do you still eat salmon? Why did that make the cut?
Well, I've always liked salmon, and I just couldn't bear the idea of giving up all meat. You know, and there are people who eat fish, right? Who are vegetarian except for fish. That's fairly common. So occasionally I secretly branch out to other fish, but mostly it's just salmon. Yeah. So
Still eat sushi for lunch?
yes, I do. Yeah. So I have salmon sushi for lunch. Yeah, that's still my, and I eat lunch very early in the day, as if I was always on sort of East Coast time. So the cafeteria starts serving lunch at 10:30 in the morning, and I'm like the first person there. There's never any competition because very few other people are seeking lunch at 10:30. Yeah, so you're finding out a lot of unnecessarily complicated things about me this morning. But I point out the 4 segments of this birthday party are remarkably different from each other. And if you think of the confident presenters we've had in this session and very talented speakers and so on, yeah, we also have very humble people speaking later who are constantly questioning us about, are you sure that people will be interested in what I have to say? Yeah, and yeah, so we've got everything you can imagine. And Pooja is sort of bookending the 4 sessions. So it's the evening for her so in session 1. So after this, she's going to bed, and then she's getting up tomorrow morning to join session 4. So she will be back. Yeah. So that's
Actually, I won't be able to stay throughout the segment 1 because I have to like make my children go to bed, so I'll have to leave early.
Yeah. Well, we only have 29 minutes left, so we're almost done, and you've been here for most of it. Yeah. But you know, it is really an unpredictable day also. I had only one person contact me for the Zoom links where I did not provide it. And this person is a dermatologist in Connecticut, and she wanted the links for all 4 sessions. I cannot really think of any connection between her and me. So I asked her to explain herself more, and she never wrote back. So Anyway, I think maybe we're safe now. I don't know why this dermatologist from Connecticut was out to sabotage the meetings, but we've nipped that in the bud, man. So anyway, we're safe now, I think. Yeah. So that's the only potentially negative thing that's happened thus far. And yeah, but thank you so much for being here. The fact that Julinor was the first one here was completely unexpected, but it's nice to find like that was at 7:15 our time that somebody's so eager actually come in 15 minutes early. Yeah, but you can never predict that kind of thing. So I would also point out that for a lot of people wondering about the quality of these sessions, the fact that the intellectual content of segment 1 is so high, it's going to sort of blow them away, right? Like, holy smokes, I never knew that the content would be so deep. Yeah, so that kind of protects us if we think in segment 3 that we have quite superficial stuff. We're going to do Kim trivia, where you try to guess, strange details of Kim's life, and we're going to eat a bit of cake and ice cream and sing birthday songs and stuff like that. Yeah, but people are probably more likely to watch segment 1 than segment 3. So they probably always have this great feeling of how very consequential Kim's birthday party celebration was. So thanks to all of you who contributed to that. Yeah.
Kim, I've got another question for you.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, you shared some of your diet secrets with us.
Right.
Are you looking forward to eating salmon that's been grown in a lab rather than the salmon that's had sentient experiences and then being killed?
And I do a lot of eating of sort of Beyond Meat burger, that sort of thing, alternatives to meat that currently exist, and I look forward to more of that. And when we say machines smarter than the whole aggregate human race in somewhere between 2035 and 2045, that's pretty smart, right? And these simple ways of trying to bluff them and convince them that this basic human goodness is really a real thing, whereas we all know that maybe it's not, or we're suspicious. Every time we watch the news, it makes the basic human goodness is not as predominant as we thought as a human characteristic. Yeah. Anyway, so we'll see how that goes in the long run.
Well, we need to find more ways of showing that basic human goodness. The news, by its nature, looks at the things that are going wrong, usually. I don't want a silly Pollyanna-ish, naive picture of human goodness, but we need to understand where all the goodness is and orient society so that we elevate it and take advantage of it and highlight it and build on it. So I think that's a core attribute. And we're doing that not just because we want the AIs to forgive us
it would be better
and keep
for
us
us.
going. It's better for us now if we can discover that goodness now. The goodness in all of us, even the politicians we most despise, there probably are some good characters in there too. And we've got to find the ways of encouraging that goodness and making the nastier mental health issues become less significant.
Yeah. Well, I would point out that politicians are people that we really need. We think maybe that politics is a bad word, but David has probably come closer than any of the rest of us to really meaningful engagement in politics, and may go further with that. But I'm constantly running up against situations where either politics in general or maybe something even scarier, which is medical politics, is the only solution to things, you know? So that also needs to be enhanced. But getting back to what young people can do, I think, as you know, in 2013, I started pushing this idea of young people fixing things. I think young people could probably create a newscast sort of for young people by young people about mainly this positive stuff. But some of it would be things that have continued for a very long time that are still interesting and still valuable today. I call that timeless content. Our most popular video ever is a video on existential risk from 2011, so 10 years ago. It's more popular, more widely watched, and still watched today than any other video that I've ever created. And it seems to me there must be something good about creating timeless content, you know, writers, musicians, artists, and so on, who create stuff that is popular for many centuries. They value that a lot. Why couldn't we all be aiming for that, you know? So I'm hopeful that this quest for a young person leader won't take 7 years, and somebody will step forward and say, I want to do that good newscast, and I know how to make it work, and yeah, to make it seem consequential. And so the other group you could reach that way, you know, when I talk about young people not listening to the news today, the other group that uniformly does not listen to the news are celebrities, famous people. They may not have any connection to the news, or they assign some people to sort of watch the news and summarize for them what they need to know from the news. So if young people create this,
You have your youngest person online there. You have your youngest person online there.
Even say hi.
You're answering your call. Hi.
No, this is the
Hello.
older child of the two. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that we could accidentally capture the interest of a lot of, you know, celebrities and politicians with this good newscast from young people for young people. Yeah. So that would be one side effect of that. You may know that the tech leader, Peter Diamandis, is somebody that I spent a lot of time listening to. Actually, I tried to farm out listening to him to the students, and they don't seem very eager. But one of the things he can really wax poetic on is why he doesn't watch the news. All the reasons that watching the news is very bad for you, that everything about it is just that, you know, you should avoid watching the news. He's more eloquent on that than any other subject. Okay.
Why is it that your group of students aren't so interested in listening to Peter Diamandis? Do you have an answer to that?
Well, I think it's not bad what they think. That even though you know that there are a lot of people not trained in AI pontificating about it, that it doesn't mean you can't have good ideas about AI if you're not you know, computing scientist. Elon Musk is not trained in AI. He's obviously doing a lot of important things there. But they feel that we need more legitimate training, at least some of us, so that in conversations about AI, people don't mention terms that none of us from our team have a clue what they mean. You know, that's like a bad moment. And what's happened recently, I was mowing my lawn one day, and Rich Sutton lives near me, and he used to jog in front of my house, and my house is the turnaround time and is jogging. And his health has changed a bit, and now he does spirited, rapid walking. He walked past and stopped, and we talked about things. And he agreed that he can help us at the final part of this, making sure that our team is not caught blindsided by any AI term we haven't heard of yet. He says if we would go through the other usual steps. So what I'm saying, David Wood, is that the students would prefer to take courses in AI and get AI certificates, as opposed to listening to Peter talk about his speculations about the future, because they can get the sort of distilled essence of that from me, since I'm listening to Peter. So yeah, I think that's how that's working at the moment. So yeah, I am really very pleased with this session, and it makes us look very organized, you know, that people who start watching it will think, holy smokes, all this stuff about life on Earth that I never knew before, that this group assembled by Kim Solez has really grasped, you know, and that's kind of cool. So I'm sure we won't maintain that level constantly for the other three segments, but I thank you very much for that. If you think of women being brave, you should realize that Pooja is the only fellow to ever have joined me coming from the other side of the planet with a very young child, and then conceiving a second child while she was with us. So that's a kind of bravery men can't begin to understand what that is like, you know, right? Yeah.
I should thank my husband for that. Like, he was a very big help. It wouldn't have been possible without him. Like,
yeah,
the whole thing. Yeah.
It was a good partnership, and it's very nice that when somebody talks about spine surgery, I can say I know a spine surgeon, because your husband is a spine surgeon, and he spent a lot of hours listening to us talk about the future in the course, and he fit in perfectly. It was a nice formulaic collaboration we had. For the outside world, they probably didn't understand how this connection between these five people worked, you know, the four members of your family and me, but it worked pretty well somehow. Yeah.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Since I missed the large part of the presentation by Taryn, I was wondering if it would be possible to access the slides so that I could sort of capture and not miss the major points.
So there are two things. One is I can send you the slides now because Taryn sent me the slides, but also this segment will be on YouTube. So when the magic of the internet is really working well for you, you can watch the whole thing sometime.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so you'll have it both ways.
Yeah.
Also, Taryn would be very honored if you have a presentation in which you want to talk about her thoughts and work. I think that would be very nice. She was so excited. There was one day when she found out about how long I've been doing things, and Nepal, you know, since 1998. There's nothing about me that excited her more than that. It really legitimized my presence on Earth, that I had that history.
So this it sounds like this potential collaboration is going to work.
Yeah.
You know, for a long time.
Right.
So it's a great opportunity to also see Poojaji. We have been meaning to meet in person, but COVID related lockdown did not, you know, allowed us to materialize that.
Yeah, we will meet for sure. So we'll meet.
Absolutely. So please say hello to Bigan.
Yeah,
I haven't seen him for some time now in the hospital.
Yeah, actually, like we got COVID, and then I was a bit unwell because of COVID. So yeah, and then he also got COVID. Then like our kids fell ill. Then his mother, then his father. Like so, it has been going on and on in the family. So like he's been busy with the family. So
okay. I hope you all are well now.
yeah. It was a bit tough for me, but I recovered. Like I'm fine now.
Okay, that's good news.
Yeah.
So Taryn, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. It is very inspiring, and you know, it brings a positive energy when one listens to your even listening to your few slides of the later part of your presentation. I feel the positive vibe, you know, coming up. Yeah. So that's great. So that is the reason why I wanted to get more of it by going through your entire set of slides.
So very early in Taryn's time with us, she had an occasion. She was doing a workshop for Humanity Plus, and the executive director there, Natasha Vita-Moore, you can see the two of them going head to head at this intellectual debate. Anyway, it's so cool. That's available on YouTube to see. Yeah, so it just shows you that young people can do a heck of a lot, you know. They should never be undervalued, because at least some of them are remarkably capable. If you think of people changing the world, it could just as easily be a young person as an older person.
Yeah.
So but also, I guess my birthday party proves that older people can also do a lot.
So it's also nice to see you, Mallory and Zolinor. Nice meeting you virtually.
Likewise, great to meet you. I'm kind of amazed that this worked out time-wise. You'd think with the time change, it would be really hard to coordinate, you know, a bunch of guests in different locations. So it's awesome.
I still miss them. I was just coming straight from the hospital to catch this up.
Well, no, it's wonderful. We had a previous occasion like this where David and Taryn and Arjun did a session together. So we kind of had a trial run for today. Yeah. So anyway, that was.
So please keep me in the loop.
I certainly will. Yep.
Of the future events.
Yeah, and you know, one important thing, if you just think about bilateral learning in both directions, it's clear I've learned as much from Nepal as the country has learned from me. You know, it's probably quite a bit different from what you think. I've had some influence there, but it's not from hours and hours of me lecturing. It's a different sort of And if you think of some metaphorical things like falling on your face, I really fell on my face during one of my visits, but with like a very large number of very tiny cuts that would heal within 10 days without leaving any scar. And I, negotiated a lot of things there during that time when my face was all bandaged, and it worked pretty well. It's highly effective. You never know what life's going to bring you. But I honestly felt that if I was my normal self in that, negotiation I was undertaking there, might not have worked quite as well as when I show up with all these bandages on my face. Yeah. So.
When was that, Kim?
Well, I saw you at that time. I don't know the exact year. I'll get back to you on that. I'm thinking it was like
2007, 8, something like that.
In one of those early years.
Yeah.
So I in traveling there, I noticed I had an inner ear disturbance, and I thought, well, that's kind of cool, So I was somewhat impaired in my balance. It was the early days of tech things, so I was very proud to be this traveler with 2 laptops. So I was walking down this hall, uneven linoleum floor with a laptop in each hand, and I tripped on the uneven linoleum and fell right on my face, not protecting myself as you usually would, because so it's kind of a high-tech injury, right? Yeah. And it was very spectacular. I had blood in both eyes, a lot of very tiny cuts around the eyes. Yeah.
And
but I
story.
came back and it was just a story to tell. There wasn't a sign of it. By the time I got back, all those cuts had healed.
Good story to share on your birthday.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So anyway, well, even the timing is working out perfectly, eh? We've got 5 minutes left, and we've sort of accomplished everything. So, yeah, that augurs well for the other 3 segments. But perfect planning from Mallory Chipman. Yeah.
I did want to mention if anyone feels interested in any of the things we've kind of talked about today, even just one being mentorship and people learning from one another in different ages. And we're going to be kind of addressing that a little bit more specifically in segment 4, several hours from now. And we have a mix of programming. It feels so official. And I think it's really fun. There's going to be a poetry performance and workshop. There's going to be some live painting. Like Kim mentioned, there's going to be some Kim Jeopardy trivia. And so some of those potentially more entertainment type additions later in the day. So feel free to join us again if you're intrigued. But I think this is really special, like you said, Kim, to start the day on such a high note with all of this compelling conversation. And I just want to say thank you for all sharing today and being a part of this.
So, but what you're all feeling now, if you think of what you're feeling, you're thinking there's something missing. And that is the music. We didn't have any music this segment. So I promise you there'll be lots of music in the other segments. So we'll fill in that gap for you as well. Yeah. So
please refresh my memory. What is it going to be on the 4th session?
So the 4th session is mainly mentoring, both directions. And so I'm going to talk about it, the young people that I've been mentoring, But there's also interesting mentoring between you and me, Arjun. Arjun is the only other human being who basically dissected me in an evening. There was one other person there as sort of a witness, but he just asked me probing questions for many hours. Anyway, that turned out pretty well in the end. I think the reason nobody else has done that is I'm not that intriguing for most people, but he sort of discerned there was something a bit unusual about me, much the same as what Ching Yin Wang thought about the urgent need to get me personality tested. Yeah. So, all right. So we got 2 more minutes here, and
Yeah, some really nice birthday messages in the chat too. That's so sweet.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely great. I'm gonna save the chat here. Save chat. There. Okay, chat saved. There. So we've got a recording of this and also saved the chat, so nothing will be missing. If you missed some parts yourself, we can recreate the whole thing. And I'll send Taryn's slide set to Arjun right now. So
Thank you.
okay, great. Well, thank you all very much from the bottom of my heart. It's the best birthday I can possibly think of.
Yeah, thank you so much. Meeting you all and wishing the happy birthday to Kim.
Thank you.
So we'll continue this conversation on other occasion in the future.
Certainly, we will.
So we say namaste when we greet
Namaste.
people.
Yeah,
And we'll do it again.
indeed. Yeah.
So
Okay, everybody.
the 2 minutes over now.
Bye.
So bye now.
Bye-bye.